Hello and welcome. So today I want to talk about some books I've been reading. I've been talking a lot about movies and TV shows these last few weeks and months, and I want to go to some of the things that I've been reading. I usually save it for the end of the year when I do a big book recap, but I feel like those videos are a little bit too big and they're very dense with how many books I'm reading. It's a little bit shorter than what I'm going to be doing here, and it's more scripted. This is a little bit more off the cuff. These are 3 books that I really enjoyed. Whether they're great or not, I don't know. I just put that in the title.
Gotcha.
You can decide whether they're great or not. But without further ado, let's jump into the 3 books and let's spend some time talking about some books that I really enjoyed. First up, I've got a really short book. As you can tell, it's really tiny. It's more of a novella than an actual full-on book. It's something you could read probably in 2 hours if you're a regular reader, maybe even faster if you're really good at reading. I really enjoyed this because it was so short. It really got me out of a reading slump that I had early on in the beginning of the year, because I felt like I was reading so many big series, so many big tomes of fantasy and sci-fi, that this was a really nice refresher into something small and to the point. It is Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. Franz Kafka is a German writer from the early 20th century. I believe this was written in 1915. Yeah, it says right here on the back of the book. So it's an old book, over 100 years old, even though the great thing about books is you can read books from 2,000 years ago. They span such a long period of time, but this one is fairly old. Straight to the point, it's a book about a guy who becomes a gigantic insect. In the book, it never specifies which gigantic insect he becomes, but most of the time it's a gigantic cockroach. And that's not a spoiler, it's not in his head. He became a gigantic human-sized cockroach overnight. It's the first sentence in the novel, and that's what I really like about this book. It does not waste your time when it comes to what it's trying to say. Now you're probably wondering, where could that go? How can you create a story around that? And I don't want to spoil anything, but I think it has really good commentary on familial relations, how we interact with each other in our families, good points about psychology, our mental state, our independence, our bodily independence, and how actually reliant we are on being able to do whatever we want when we want, being able to feed ourselves, walk ourselves, and how people that don't have that ability, it's very hard for them to interact in the world, how it affects their families. This takes a very negative view of that. I believe Franz Kafka was an existentialist, don't quote me on that, but most existentialists are pretty depressed, even though this does have a very good dark sense of humor. If you like a little bit of a dark comedy, a little bit of very dry German humor. Like I said earlier, it really got me out of this slump. I feel like a lot of modern books, they're hundreds of pages long because I guess that's what sells nowadays. You would think shorter books would be more on the trend because people don't have the ability to pay attention anymore. I feel like they've just gotten longer and they've become harder to read. They kind of just ramble on for pages on end. This book is the opposite. Short, straight to the point, great ideas. Great message, even if it is a dark, nihilistic kind of message. I wanted to read more psychology books, more philosophy books, shorter reads, more classics as well. I've read a lot of classics this year compared to previous year, which was very fantasy and sci-fi heavy. So I'm glad that this got me out of my reading slump, and maybe it'll get you out of your reading slump as well. So Franz Kafka, Metamorphosis. Technically, it's The Metamorphosis. Next up, now that I'm done making fun of big, long, modern books, here's a nice, big, modern, long book for you. This is The Terror. Dan Simmons is an author that I really enjoy. His book, Hyperion, a science fiction book, is probably in my top 3, or at least in my top 5 when it comes to sci-fi. And I've read a decent amount of sci-fi. Definitely recommend Hyperion, but if you're not big on sci-fi, if you're more into horror, this is the book for you. This is a historical fiction with horror elements in it about an expedition, a real expedition, traveling through the northern part of Canada, through the icy part. It was in Canada at the time, I'm pretty sure. It's 2 ships, Oedipus and Terror, and how they're trying to find a northwest passage through the Arctic of Canada to the other side of the United States. Well, it wasn't the United States at the time. Anyway, regardless, they were trying to get to the other side of North America, and this explores the trouble and problems and difficulties that this crew went through to get to where they were going. I won't spoil what happens because I didn't know what happens in the book. I've never heard of Oedipus or Terror. It has a lot of supernatural elements to it though, very well spaced out. There's a lot more terror, a lot more horror and dread when it comes to the nature of things. There's just only a certain amount of calories these people can eat. There's only so many diseases or injuries these people can take. That coupled with the supernatural element, human horribleness altogether. This has a lot of human evil in it, which I really enjoyed. But alongside the human evil, there is this great human spirit to it. It does show just how resilient we are as a species, how resilient we are to doing the right thing even when you don't have to, doing the right thing when it might cost you your life, and how we do evil things even when it doesn't cost us much to do the right things. This has a great duality when it comes to human nature, and the supernatural element adds a nice dread to it. It definitely pops up randomly in a good way. Like, you kind of forget about it and then it rears its ugly head and you're just like, wow, it just hits you. Honestly, I wanted to keep reading and reading. I couldn't stop reading. Great pacing, lots of great action, lots of great characters. Crozier, the main character in this, Crozier, I might be pronouncing it incorrectly. Great character, really love him. The main thing about a book like this that has such a, rising tension, a great plot, is the ending. Most of the time, endings are either sudden or long-winded or unsatisfying. I would say that the ending for this book is perfect. Everything that I wanted from it was completely satisfied. Usually a book like this that I really love, I would want it to keep going, or I would want it to have a sequel. I don't want any more, I don't want any less. Pretty rare in a read, especially this size of a book. There is a lot of body horror in this because they're getting sick, they're dying. I guess this is real life horror. But there are things that I read in this book that I was just like, wow, thank God I don't exist when scurvy was a major problem most people would face. I've got plenty of lemon juice in my house. This definitely isn't for the faint of heart. There's a lot of gut-wrenching parts. There's a lot of really emotionally, it just hits you. It's like a wave after wave of just men suffering. It also made me realize that I'm pretty soft. Men back in the day, I can't believe they did this much for this little amount of money, and most of the time they did it without complaining. This generation was definitely a lot tougher than our generation. We complain about doing homework and having a job, which, yeah, those things can be difficult. They can suck. They can affect your life greatly, but at least I ain't losing toes to the cold while I contract 3 different Arctic diseases. It could be worse. It could be worse. I could be stuck on a ship full of men that want to eat me. This book definitely puts life in perspective a little bit. Whether it's great, whether it would change your life, I don't know. But it was a lot of fun. Definitely one of the funnest reads I've had. If you enjoy historical fiction, if you like horror, if you like that gritty realism with a little bit of supernatural element to it, it fits thematically. That's the thing about it. It fits thematically. Other stories with the supernatural element kind of feel out of place. The supernatural element feels like its own character in this book. Dan Simmons for me is 2 for 2. And I want to check out his other work. I've got Songs of Kali, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, and I want to read the second book in the Hyperion series as well. Hopefully they're just as good. If you like Hyperion and you want to branch out in his other genres, I would definitely recommend The Terror. Lastly, I've got a nonfiction book. This is for the smart people. These are people that want to learn. I'm surprised not more people are talking about it, that this isn't being taught in schools. The Righteous Mind, Why Good People are Divided by Politics and Religion. Now, a title like that would probably throw you off from a book like this. You're thinking that the author is most likely very left-leaning or very right-leaning. While he does openly state his politics, I think this book is as neutral as it can get when it comes to theories and ideas. And the best part about this book, especially with the election coming up, is that it will de-radicalize any ideas you have about the other side. It definitely shows the way that liberals think about things. It shows how Republicans think about things and how we think about morality in general. In Western society, our morality is very monolithic. It only follows one rule. Do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else. As long as it doesn't hurt any other person. That's the extent of human morality in Western countries. But in other countries in the East, or in certain third world countries, or even, I would say, even countries like Russia, or, certain Latin American countries that aren't exactly Eastern or third world, their morality is a little bit different because it's layered on with a social factor and it's layered on with a religious factor. And someone who comes from a religious background, it is really interesting to hear how very secular people that have no religious ideas, no religious morality, how they see the world. On top of the different layers of morality, the way that he points out how we think about morality is really interesting. We're basically guided by our emotions. Our emotions are like a big elephant, and there's a lawyer on top sitting on the elephant. The elephant decides which way we go, and the lawyer justifies whichever way the elephant goes. Now, he points out in certain situations with certain rationalities, we can escape the elephant and we can make proper decisions, but most of the time we make a decision from our emotions and then we justify it. So he really talks about how personalities as we grow up really solidify how we think about things, and then we justify it with our knowledge and ideas. Definitely will de-radicalize you if you're being honest. If you're being honest, if you're a big left person, if you're a big right person, if you would never even consider the other side as human, this will humanize the other side. And I think it's really important, especially in the political climate we're in America. Obviously, if you're from a different country, your left and right politics might not be the same, or you might not have left-right politics. You might have multiple parties. You might think about things differently, but definitely puts a mirror up to whatever you think and makes you reevaluate your own morality, your own politics. Definitely a fantastic book. I feel like this is something we should have read in grade school, something in high school, or at least in college. Or like, this is something so vital to understanding the people around you. The main reason why it's not as popular as other books, or might not be as popular as it should be, is he does suggest certain things when it comes to our genetics and to how the social fabric of our society is that is not popular right now. But he does bring science, he does bring certain facts up that I don't feel are arguable from a scientific perspective, and I don't think our society is really ready to face some of the facts here, some of the ideas that he's pointing out. Other Jonathan Haidt books, I'm going to check them out as well. I've already have The Happiness Hypothesis. I have it on hold at the library. I'm planning on reading that as well. If you haven't read his other book, Coddling of the American Mind, another fantastic book. He's 2 for 2, just like Dan Simmons in my mind, and I'm hoping The Happiness Hypothesis will be a 3 for 3. Check him out on YouTube first if you're not comfortable buying a book like this automatically. This is the book that sparked me wanting to make this video. I mainly just wanted to talk about this book. This video is a little bit less scripted than my other videos. I just wanted to do something off the cuff, a little bit more personal, but I just wanted to give something quick for you guys to enjoy. But that's it for me today. Let me know what you guys are reading. Let me know if there's any recommendations of more singular books, more one-take kind of books, because I have been reading a lot of long series. I've started a bunch of long series. I just started The Lord of the Rings. I started Discworld, if you know that fantasy series, and I started Sun Eater, which is a kind of like a sci-fi fantasy together. So I've started a lot of series, but I want to intersperse them with more singular books, shorter reads, or more knowledgeable books. That's kind of the whole reason why I started reading, is to educate myself. So let me know down in the comments what you guys have been reading, recommendations for me, and also if you got any other recommendations, movies, TV shows, music, whatever you guys have been listening to, I would love to hear it. Like, subscribe if you enjoy what I do, and if you really like what I do, you can buy me a coffee. All of that will be in the description down below. As always, thank you for watching, and Godspeed.